We've got people here from Scottish Borders, Oxfordshire. My name's Shirley Lawson. I'm hosting this webinar this afternoon from Call Scotland's offices here at Edinburgh University. And we have Reeza Awoodun, who is down in Wiltshire. So Reeza's a product specialist for Inspiration Software, and that's going to be the topic of the webinar this afternoon. You've got the chat box there if you want to ask questions. We'll be able to pick them up at the end of the webinar. The webinar is going to run for approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll have a chance to ask Reeza some questions at the end there. So we're often asked what technology can support pupils with literacy difficulties and find it daunting and overwhelming to know how and where to start when writing a story or a report. And mind mapping software or apps can be one way to address this issue, helping students think of key ideas and see how they link up. And the same pupils may have difficulty retaining information, especially when it's only provided in words, either written or orally. So using pictures, images or symbols along with the words can help a learner understand a concept or be able to recall the information. Inspiration software and apps can provide all this support, and Reeza today will explain more and demo for you the different features that can be really helpful for learners with additional support needs. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over to Reeza, and he is going to share his desktop and continue with the webinar.
Thank you, Shirley. So if you just bear with me, everyone, just as I get my desktop shared. So thank you for that introduction. And so hopefully my screen is coming through fine, and so is the audio. So I'm Reeza. I'm the UK product specialist for Inspiration, and what we'll be looking today is looking how Inspiration as a visual learning tool can help struggling writers. And primarily what it's about is effectively scaffolding the writing process, because writing is quite a complex process. You've got to be thinking about what you've written already, what you're writing in the moment, what you want to write. You've got all of the technical aspects of writing, the spelling, punctuation and grammar, the presentation, and then also possibly fine motor control issues as well in terms of typing or writing. And so with Inspiration, you can break down the writing process. And one of the key things is that pre-writing stage as well, in terms of the ideas generation and being able to help a student overcome the blank page syndrome. So they might have those ideas in their head, but they don't know how to organize it, how to get it down onto pen and paper. And so with Inspiration, the idea is being able to chunk the writing process down into manageable steps so that the student can feel as if they're making a progress in terms of their journey. So just going to go into some slides. Now, primarily today I'll be looking at Inspiration 9, which is our desktop version for Windows. We do have a younger version. So Inspiration 9 is generally we recommend for ages 9+. So it's looking at the upper end of primary schools going into secondary and onwards into university. We do have Kidspiration, and so Kidspiration is for ages 4 to 8, and so it's a younger product, but what I'll show you with Inspiration, the methodology will be very similar. And if it's something that you're very interested in terms of looking at both Inspiration and Kidspiration, you can obviously drop me an email address and an email, and I can arrange for you to get a trial copy to have a look at. And also, if you're an advisor or an assessor, we do provide licenses for free as well. So again, if you drop me an email, I can get that arranged for you. So Inspiration is a visual learning and mind mapping tool. I'm guilty of myself of calling Inspiration a mind mapping tool. Mind mapping is only just one of a range of different techniques of a visual learning approach. And so with visual learning, you've got things such as concept maps, tree maps, all of this plethora of different visual learning techniques. And that's what Inspiration has been designed for. So as well as mind mapping is being able to use the vast array of different visual learning techniques that are out there. And it's particularly beneficial for users with neurodiverse and mental health conditions. So it is a product that's designed for all, but it has a particular benefit for these types of users. It and it's particularly for students who where their need affects their ability to communicate in writing, their ability to plan and organize their work, to structure information, where they have challenges in terms of analyzing and synthesizing information, working memory, which is can be a real struggle, particularly in terms of that writing process, where with limited working memory, you're trying to rush to get all of those ideas out before you forget it. And so, again, going back to this point of inspiration being a way of being able to chunk the writing process down, break it into small manageable parts, you can just focus on getting those ideas out and then start to work from that. And then ultimately what we're trying to do with inspiration, as well as being able to synthesize and understand the information, is also to be able to retain that information. And this is where, particularly with our dual coding approach of using visual cues alongside traditional verbal cues, what we're trying to do is retain that information from your short to medium to long term. So examples of the types of users that can particularly benefit from a tool like Inspiration are those with dyslexia and dyspraxia, and symptoms that are the outcomes of mental health conditions, anxiety, for example, where what it's doing is affecting cognition. And we are finding that more increasingly. So traditionally, quite often our users would have been those with dyslexia and dyspraxia. Now increasingly, particularly in terms of when you start to go into the university sector and the DSA, Disabled Students Allowance grant that's available, we're increasingly finding it's being recommended for students with anxiety and other mental health conditions. So just to give you an illustration before we sort of deep dive into the software, is looking at example diagrams that you can create using Inspiration. Now, as I said earlier, we're passionate about a dual coding approach where what we're using, as well as the verbal cues being the keywords that basically explain an idea, or it can be the notes that you can associate to an idea. What we're trying to use is visual cues as well. So the visual cues can be things such as images that explain an idea as well. It could be color, so using color to be able to categorize information. Things such as the links, again, another visual cue, so you're showing how one idea connects to another, and by doing that you start to see the relationships, the patterns, and start to see the effect, the cause and effects of different ideas on one another. So we've got a simple process map here of how to make the perfect cup of tea. That can sometimes cause some friction between different groups of people in terms of, do you put your milk in first or do you put in afterwards? And so we have this process map here in terms of making a cup of tea, but then we have these more complicated concept diagrams here. So this is a concept map. The idea of a concept map is to explain a concept, explain a topic. So again, we've got some very good visual learning techniques here. We've got images to represent ideas. So we've got a double helix for the DNA. We've got obviously color being used here to try and group information together. And obviously we've got the links to show the process of what DNA goes through. And we've got link phrases here which explain why you've connected one idea to another. And I'll quickly show you in the software. So we have a link phrase bank to connect, to explain why you've connected one idea to another. The reason for that is, one, particularly when you're creating your map, at that moment in time, you may understand why you've connected one idea to another. But if you go back to it, say in a month's time, perhaps from a revision perspective, you may have forgotten why DNA connects to replication. And so labeling your links as to why you've connected one idea to another can be a very powerful means in terms of that revision process afterwards, trying to remember why you've connected one idea to another. Also, for example, if you're a student, sharing this with a teacher, and perhaps you've been asked to explain the water cycle for example. If, say, for example, you've mapped the concept out incorrectly, but you've explained using these link phrases why you've connected one idea to another, the teacher, the tutor, the lecturer gets more of an understanding of what the misconception is, the misunderstanding, and obviously can put in some remedial action into that. So just to summarize the benefits of inspiration before we go into the software, ultimately, particularly from this whole writing process, what students are doing are struggling to explain their ideas, their knowledge in a writing format, is enabling them to aid communication using a more visual approach. Stimulating creativity and ideas generation. Ideas is the food that's needed in terms of the writing process, either writing a report or creating a presentation. And so we do have tools like the rapid fire tool that's there to get those ideas going. There could be good ideas, bad ideas, but the key thing, get them down. Once you've got it down, you can synthesize that and then decide what you want to focus on and what you want to discard. We do have starter templates, so again, it can help students who perhaps have got lots of ideas buzzing around in their heads, but they just need a framework to start that writing process off, to focus on the big ideas before they start to drill down further. This whole visual learning approach, one of the key things is being able to reduce cognitive load. So they're obviously struggling with the writing process. If we can introduce a visual approach, a multimodal approach, so we're using visuals, we're using audio, what we're trying to do is trying to get them engaged in ways that they can feel more motivated, that they feel more comfortable in terms of processing information. Now, developing schemas for understanding concepts is a good thing, great thing that inspiration is good at. So what we're trying to do is if we're trying to learn about a topic, a particular concept, what we're doing is creating a diagram, a map. And so what this is creating a schema of an understanding of that particular concept, of how ideas connect to one another. And so, you know, for an expert, they've created this in their head. For a student, they're having to create that, and that's what this inspiration can help with, creating these concepts of understanding. And then through this whole revision process, a process of reviewing these mind maps afterwards, 24, you know, an hour, next day, a month. And what you're trying to do is then embed that from your short to medium to long term, so that when you have to come back and recall that, it's easier to recall that information. Inspiration is a tool. It's got tools in there to help in terms of encouraging and supporting planning, say with the templates, and also some checklist tools that we've got in there as well, just to very easily just show your progress. And then obviously we're mapping our ideas out visually, but what we want to do is kickstart the writing process. So we do have a one-click feature that goes to an outline view that creates a writing framework for us. And then ultimately, what we're trying to do is, from whatever is being learned, is being able to engage with that student for them to effectively synthesize, analyze that information, and to move that from their short to medium to long term in preparation for, you know, a test, an exam, the normal summative ways in which we tend to, you know, assess a student. And just to touch on it, we do have an app for iPads and iPhones that complements the desktop version as well. And just to quickly go over that, obviously what that does is, you know, with a tablet, it's portable, it's, you know, it's something that's very mobile, it's instant on, you know, so it means that you can be very productive in short bursts of time. And then also it provides that ability to quickly add photos and sounds quite quickly to your diagrams, because they've got built-in cameras, they've got built-in mics, and it is also something that's very close to the natural way in which of hand-drawn mind maps. And for certain users, that whole kinesthetic approach, the touchy-feely side of things of mind mapping, can't be underestimated. So the app can be a very powerful bridge for those that want to move to a more digital format of mind mapping, but do like, you know, preferred the old pen and paper style. So let's jump into the software. Just bear with us as I flick applications. So we're in inspiration here. Now we're not going to have the time to go into all the environments, but we're going to do a quick project. So this would be our starter screen. Now we have a diagram view. Now you can go directly into an outline view if you prefer a writing format, and if you've got students who like checklists and creating checklists, an outline format you can start off with to structure your ideas. Or we have a map view, which is the more Buzan style of mind mapping, where you've got central ideas and branches coming off. I'm going to focus on the diagram view today. In here we've got the templates area, where if you go into that, we've got over 100 different templates all organized into different subject areas. From everything from creating a haiku poem to a compare and contrast mind map diagram that you can then start to populate. So let's go into creating a diagram. And so what's really big in the news at the moment, and as obviously over the weekend, over the last few days, is particularly the Extinction Rebellion protests that have been happening in London, for example. So we're going to do a quick project on that. And through that, I'll be showing you some of the key features within inspiration. So Extinction Rebellion is what we're going to be writing about. So we've got our main idea, we've changed that. Now, if I've got a user who's got visual stress, that white background might be something that's uncomfortable. If I right click, I can change that background color to something a bit more muted. Now, if we can then start to expand on that. So with that particular idea, I can add some notes. So I've got this note icon up here. I can add to that, and I could do a quick summary of what is the Extinction Rebellion movement. So is a socio-political movement which is focused on getting governments sorting out the climate crisis. Each note can have up to 8 full pages, so there's quite a lot of text that you can put into each one. There is a built-in spell checker, inline spell checker. So if I right click, I can choose the right word. I can, for example, highlight a word, go to the word guide. I can get a definition. I can also get synonyms, so similar words, or antonyms, which are opposite words. And then if I wanted to, I could choose something and choose replace, and it will change that for me. So that's a note. I can hide that away for now. And so what I then can start to do is to use the rapid fire tools to quickly brainstorm some ideas. I can do that with links or without links. I'll do it with links. And so the idea being is I'm starting to explore different ideas around this particular topic. So I could be looking at the 3 demands that they're looking at, the crisis that they're focusing on, Greta Thunberg, one of the inspirational climate activists who's been in quite a bit of the news and did a really good speech at the protests at the weekend. And so just by typing and pressing enter, I'm creating these ideas bubbles. Now, I talked about this whole dual coding approach. So within here, I can then start to do things like find pictures. So if, say, for example, I went to the internet, Greta Thunberg, go into images, got a picture here. Just download that. I could then right click and insert an image. Drop that in. And what I may want to do is also look at, obviously, she did a really good speech. I found that on YouTube. I might want to link to that. So if I click on share, I can take that link from there, go back to my inspiration map. So what I'm doing is consolidating all of the various different research material that I'm using for this particular project. Go edit hyperlink, go into there, click on it, do OK. You'll see that's hyperlinked. So what would happen then if I clicked on it? And it'll open up a file. I can, for example, if I go back, hyperlink any one of these symbols. So I did that one way. I could click on here. I could go to a web page. I did have a web page for the Extinction Rebellion homepage. Click on that. So what I'm doing is collecting all of the material, stuff that I want to use as part of my project. Click that in there. Right, let's look at the 3 demands and go to the rapid fire tool. So the 3 demands is asking the government to tell the truth. So basically admit there's a crisis happening. Act now. Basically zero emission. By 2025. And create a citizens assembly to deal with it, or to actually consult with, which I'm not sure how successful that will be, considering how much of a mess Brexit is as well at the moment. So right, so again we could use the symbols library to try and just make this more interesting. So let's look at some of the options here. So you have access to over 1 million different images and symbols to explain an idea. And so I can go into here. Where have I got? Here are number boxes. So just to make it interesting, I could just drag and drop these in and replace them. With the crisis, we could be looking at other aspects as well. So let's look at, so what we're doing is looking at this and starting to expand on ideas. So one of the crises is around climate. And the other one is over ecology. I can use this search feature here to access the million symbols. So if I do Earth, do a search, I can bring that in, drop that in. For climate, global warming, I might have the sun, bring that in. I can do things even like embed videos in. So I found a video on how clouds can affect global warming. And so create a new one. But I'm going to embed a video, so not just link to it, but embed it. So if I insert video or sound, go to video, click, just go to my drive. So what it's doing is actually embedding that video in. So if you was to send that file to someone else, the actual video would be embedded in. So it's a very multimodal approach to visual learning. So you're using images, you're using video, and in a minute I'll show you about the audio features as well. And so I've got my video there, and if I was to then click on it, So it was a TED talk that I downloaded down, and so I've actually embedded it into the actual diagram itself.
I am a climate scientist, and I hate.
So, and as you start to look at this, you know, the various different ideas, you then start to see how they can impact on one another, and how, and then so you can start to connect up the various different relationships and the interplay between them. So obviously the climate will have an effect on ecology as well. We could look at Act Now and this particular idea. Again, we could then start to look at that and say, and all the time we can rearrange this and move things around as we're starting to expand on our ideas. So again, we could look at the rapid fire tool and say, well, what are some of the ideas in terms of how we could, if we were to, in 6 years' time, get zero emission? You know, something that you could do as a whole class group exercise on a whiteboard, and so and get people to look. So we're looking at how. Oh, let's correct that. And so how could we do that? Again, use the rapid fire tool. Want to, right? So how could be transport and looking at that. We could be looking at power generation. Farming. Correct that. Just right click, power. Let's look at transport. Get some more images in. Let's get a boat in. And then we could, so you see, we could do some notes here. Not much has been done here for shipping and cutting their emissions. But you could do audio notes. So if I did right click, I could do insert video or sound, go to record sound, and I could actually do audio notes against each one of these. So you're restricted to 60 seconds for each one. The idea being is that you want the student not to be verbose, but to be very succinct in terms of their audio summaries. So farming produces a lot of emissions, particularly in terms of livestock. Stop, save it. You'll see a little microphone appear here. So if I was to click play, farming produces a lot of emissions, particularly in terms of livestock. So what's happening is each idea then triggers others. So we could look at transport. Again, we could look at here and say, well, okay, then let's look at electric cars. It's obviously one way of cutting emissions. But if we look at that, there is an impact in terms of power generation. You know, all of these cars being plugged in, particularly if we were to try and do this ASAP to meet this 2025 deadline. Have we got the infrastructure? So you start to look at the interplay between different ideas. And so on this one particularly, there's an interplay between both, so I can have it to show that there's an impact both ways. Obviously, electric cars need the infrastructure in terms of power generation to make sure that we can keep these fleets of cars going. Obviously, we increase the number of electric cars, that's going to have a strain in terms of the power generation. So you're starting to see the links between them. And then I know time's running out, so just to finish off, but hopefully it's given you a bit of a glimpse in terms of how you start to develop a project. If we go then into the outline view, you can then start to see that with one click, we've got our writing framework. We can, for example, drag and drop different ideas if we want to resort them into different aspects, into a different priority. We can add notes, tell the truth. This is a real crisis. And they do interrelate with one another. So if I go to the diagram view, and go to tell the truth. There should be a notes, and there it is. So it's been added in. So what you do in one environment affects another one. And then so you start to develop this map into something that, you know, has got all of your notes in, and you can work in the outline view. You can hide and close different sections so that you're just focusing on one section at the time, particularly if you struggle with dealing with lots of passages of text. You can show the symbols and icons associated with each idea. So again, you're leveraging on this whole dual coding approach. And once you've finished, you can transfer it to as a Word document. It'll ask me to save it. Just save it to my desktop. And it's now then taken over to Word. And so whilst I was working in a very visual format, I have been writing, and that's, you know, that's a good way in terms of, you know, particularly reluctant writers, getting them engaged for a more visual approach and actually behind the scenes they're writing and get that satisfaction afterwards. As well as, we won't have time to do this now, but as well as exporting to Word, we do have a presentation manager where, actually, if I just quickly do it, you can export it to PowerPoint. And so it will create a set of slides. But what it will do is it will take a snapshot of each section. And then what you can then do is drag images on that it's automatically taken that best supports the point or argument that you're making. And so what it's doing with Inspiration is using the whole visual learning approach to stimulate those ideas, organize and structure it. And then finally, when you're ready, move to the outline view, organize and structure it from a writing perspective. And then again, once you're ready then to move on to Word, you can use the transfer tool to move it to Word, or use the Power presentation manager to export it to PowerPoint if it's a presentation that you're creating. So I know I've run over time, but hopefully that's given you a good idea of what Inspiration can do. We do offer trials, so if you want to drop me an email, my email is reza@inspiration.com, so reeza@inspiration.com, and I'd be more than happy to assist in getting a trial copy to you. And also, if you're an assessor or an advisor, we provide the licenses for free, so just drop us an email and I can get that arranged for you. So that's all. I've got everything to say, Shirley, and show from my perspective.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Reeza. Do you want to just stop sharing there and we'll go back to the main screen and see if anyone's got any questions there?
Yep.
There's just so much in the software. There's so many useful features using the multimedia, the audio, the images and the video, and you can really see how it would help support learning and help students retain information and for revision. You are getting a bit like me at the end of things when you want to keep adding, oh, and there's another thing it can do and another thing it can do, but there really is some excellent features in there. And the idea that you're going from the visual, the mapping part, to then looking at it in the linear view to create the writing framework. And then I didn't know about the presentation feature as well, so that's really good to have that all in there as well.
Yeah, it's a feature that even a lot of power users don't realize is actually in there. So
yeah, and so Doug's got a question here. He's asking, are there any plans to have a dictation function in the software?
Okay, so in terms of speech to text, there isn't within the software Inspiration 9, the desktop version. It will work with Dragon. So if you've got Dragon actually speaking, you can use that to dictate into Inspiration. But the app for iOS, so iPads and iPhones, does support speech to text because it uses Siri that's built into iPhones and iPads, so you can use that approach. One of the features I didn't show was there is text to speech within the software. So if you have students who like to listen to what they've written as a kind of sense check, there is a built-in text to speech feature as well, where they can have anything that they've typed in read back to them.
So that's a really good feature. And then all your spell checking features as well. There's lots of assistive features that would be very good for somebody with a literacy difficulty in there. No other questions there at the moment, but I had just one. If you create a project in the Inspiration software, can you transfer that to the iPad and open it in the app?
You can. So they're designed to work together. And so you can, particularly from a revision process, because obviously, particularly with older students who, if they've got iPhones or they've got a tablet, it's much more portable. So they can take their files that they've created onto the desktop and have it all on their iPhone. So it's something that's quick to retrieve and go through. You can also create diagrams and maps on the app itself and transfer it back to the desktop. So
okay, right.
They're fully interchangeable.
Good. So just in terms of participants being able to access a trial copy, do you want to just put your email address, Reeza, into the chat box and then people could pick it up from there?
Yep.
We do that, and then also just a reminder that if you are an assessor or an advisor, that you can get a free copy of the software. So there's Reeza put in the email address there. If you want to take note of that and access a trial copy, you'll be happy to do that. If we don't have any more questions, we'll probably just wrap up here just now. We've run slightly over, but I think it was really worth it to see all the great features of the Inspiration software. And a big thank you to Reeza for giving us that demo today.
That's right, no problem, it's been a pleasure. So thank you everyone for attending, and look forward to hearing from you if you need any further assistance.
Good, right, thank you very much everyone for attending. Thank you, bye for now.